Am I talking? Okay. Welcome everybody to a very special edition of another DFC episode. We're up to our shenanigans like always, but this time we've got a very special guest with us, Wayne Schaack. He is the Director of Product for the Pronto Automotive Distribution Network. Wayne has 44 years of experience in the automotive aftermarket, and that's starting from working for warehouse distributors and now for the Bryan Group. Really, he's seen it all, and he's one of the pioneers in the industry of wanting the quality of the products to be at OE before everybody else wanted it. And of course, with us as always, Dino Crescentini, our co-founder and resident parts guru. And today, what we're going to talk about is really having Wayne give us his perspective of what's important to warehouse distributors, to technicians, to the end user of the vehicle, and really hit us with some tough questions of what's really the demand, in product and the industry. What do really people want to know now? With that, I'll hand it off to you, Wayne.
Good. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to talking to Dino. He's the godfather of brakes, at least in my opinion. Very well-known individual around the country from multiple companies, and I spent a lot of time in manufacturers, even in overseas, and Dino is very well-known over there as well. And really, what I wanted to talk about today is a couple questions that I don't think the industry is really, at least in my opinion, I haven't seen these questions come up before. As I said, I've been around many different manufacturers of brake. I'm not here to endorse one or offer really an opinion on anybody, other than I really wanted to spend some time with Dino and just ask a couple questions. And really, the questions I want to ask tie around what I've heard over the years from both consumers and installers when it comes to challenges or issues with friction specifically. And what I mean by that is we've heard over and over again that more and more technicians in the past, when they ran into challenges with friction, seem to want to go back to an OE brake pad. The thought was prevailing that perhaps that might offer, if they had an issue, they had to come back, they would tackle it in that direction. And Dino, what I wanted to find out from you, in your perspective, we've had a little brief conversation about this, but it's been a prevailing thought over the years and things that I've come across, but there have been certain technicians who've come to me and said, you know what, we finally just gotten tired of using brand A, brand B, brand C. Why can't I just go back to OE, the dealership, or whomever that may be, and buy the exact same piece of friction that came on my car the day it was manufactured? Seems like a logical question. If I've got a car that's 4 years old and it performed very well and maybe 40,000 miles, 50,000 miles, 35,000 miles, and everything worked perfectly on it, you would think, logically, why would I go through the effort of trying brand A, B, C, D, E, when really what I was looking for is what came on the car? My thought is I'd put it back on, it's going to work perfectly. And to that point, I've had friends of mine, consumers, who have complained about the same type of issues where they've had brakes replaced and all of a sudden they have some type of a noise issue that comes up 10,000 miles down the road, maybe 2-3 months down the road, going back to an installer. The comment came back to them, we can always go back and get the OE piece of friction. I really want to know, what do you think the odds are if I go back today and have my 4 to 10-year-old vehicle and I go to OE and I buy a set of brake pads, what are the odds that it's going to be the exact same piece of friction that came on that car?
Well, my experience would suggest that it'd be pretty slim. And the reason being is that once a car goes past model, the OEM production ceases, and typically the OEMs will go to what's called an OE service part, which really has nothing to do with what came out of the vehicle. It's a very high quality product, but it's not what came out of the vehicle. And if it gets older still, then they'll have their own aftermarket program, which is purely an aftermarket product. I mean, something that shares, it could be sold in many other images that you might see out in the market, and it would literally be the same thing. But another thing is that even if you were to go with your 4 to 10-year-old car and get that exact same product that came out, there's all kinds of other dynamics taking place, particularly if the vehicle is from the Northeast or the Midwest, where they salt the roads and put all kinds of brine solution and things to clear the roads. These things will wreak havoc on brake systems and chassis systems, and from the bearings to the suspension pickup points to the caliper actuation, the slides in the caliper, and so forth. So, unless everything was operating in a vacuum, which it's not going to react the same no matter what.
So basically, if we started out with something that was pristine, with a brand new rotor and pads, which quite honestly, if I understand this correct from our conversation before, could have very well been a different manufacturer than the caliper itself, but essentially everything was brand new OE. You would like to think we put it all back in the same way, but there's other things that can contribute to problems as well, or challenges when you're going for the second replacement. We mentioned this earlier. We talked about rotors as an example. That was a good point. I really didn't think about buildup on rotors and some of the challenge of trying to cut rotors. That was one thing we mentioned. I thought was worth at least discussing that, because that can also play into the issues that we have as well.
Yeah, for sure. It all has to do, that part of the discussion has to do with caliper retraction. And again, if you've got these intense climates that they operate in, the calipers probably, for a couple reasons, either the guide pins aren't operating as smoothly as possible as they were when they were new, and then the seal wear may also have an effect. So when you have a high degree of seal wear over time, what you're going to get is the piston's not going to retract upon release of the brake pedal, right? It's not going to retract as much. Couple that with guide pins that perhaps aren't as lubricated as they should be, or maybe the boot cracked and maybe some grit got in there. You're going to have a situation when the pad doesn't retract. Well, now it's resting up against that rotor a little closer than it was before. And of course, no rotors are perfectly flat. I mean, they've all got some degree of runout in there. Mm-hmm. The OE spec typically is 2,000ths or less. Some aftermarket ones may be a little bit more. But what's happening is you're setting up a situation where if the pad's not retracting, on that little bit of runout that exists, you might be getting, with every revolution, especially with a type of product, a type of brake pad that is called adherent, where it it places a film layer onto the rotor. Well, if there's some runout and the pad's not retracting, you're getting an excess amount of film developing on that one area where there's that high degree of runout, right? And so mile after mile, revolution after revolution, it gets to the point where now you're going beyond the 2,000ths thickness of runout, and you're getting an application of this pad material on that one area. And that's what's building up, and that's what could lead to what most people think is a warped rotor. So it is warped in that it's not parallel anymore, but it's not because the metal's warping, it's because of the pad film transfer.
Well, there's 2 points I took away on that then, and I know it gets technical and we're in the weeds, but still, when you come right down to it, a caliper, it has to have the ability to retract to some degree. It has to, because if it doesn't, you don't know it by looking at it, but by design, it's meant to retract. It is designed to do that, and I understood that because we had talked about that, and I've known that from the past. So you have that situation, and that also, when you talk about the rotor with perhaps what's being built up into those areas, that may also lead to conditions where people come back and technicians find themselves cutting a rotor again with the hopes of removing that, replacing pads. We could still be chasing something else, and then at that time installing a set of OE friction, because that may be the thing they go to on that, and it may or may not. It's still going to lay down the same types of issues as time goes on.
Well, if I can go back to the first question you posed,
It's from when we were out in the field, you know, a lot of technicians are having issues with the brake pads that they're putting on the vehicles. And it almost seems like they start off at a lower price level. That doesn't take care of things. And they start going up and up in pricing, thinking that that's gonna correct the issue, right? They think that if it's a more expensive pad, that if it's an OE pad, that it's somehow gonna fix the issue. But really what you had said was that not necessarily if it's an OE box, it's really OES, and it could be very far from what originally came on the vehicle.
Could be.
And that still could not fix the issue as well.
No.
It could be a combination of things. It couldn't even be maybe the pad's fault at all.
It could be very much the caliper. I mean, typically it would be a caliper. I think a lot of people don't place the emphasis on the caliper as much as should be, because there's so much going on there. You know, with the seal, with the guide pins, and you know, even when they put a rebuilt one on there sometimes, and I'm not here to diss anybody, but I mean, the reality is, having been in the caliper rebuilding business myself, you know, you would see what certain people would do, and you know, when you have a caliper that's wheel abraded with the guide pins on, for example, you're opening yourself up to a big problem, and the shops don't know how they're getting built. That's the thing. And so different brands have different features and benefits, and it's just really important to further and better understand what you're putting on the car. You know, really, the shop should know, not just on the brake pads and on the rotors, but the caliper and the surrounding system, the hardware and things like that. Because every one of those components will make a difference in how the brake job performs, either immediately or over time.